27th, 2014. We will begin this evening's meeting with the invocation by Bishop Tom Halsey, followed by our pledge to the nation's flag, led by the Boy Scouts of America, Troop 903, the Elks Lodge, 1903.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we ask for wisdom and understanding as we prepare to carry out a meeting for our great city. We also ask that you bless Councilwoman Beverly Williams and her procedure she goes through, and most of all, God, that you give grace to each and every one of our families. In the precious name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Boy Scouts of America, if you would come down to the podium and help us start our Pledge of Allegiance.
Here.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you being here. And for those of you on council, you may be appreciative to know that the Troop 903 is going to remain with us this evening and observing our council meeting this evening as part of their merit badge procedure for Boy Scouts. So thank you very much for coming. We appreciate the leadership for bringing them and the parents for accompanying her tonight. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much for allowing us to come.
You're welcome. Bishop Halsey, thank you very much, sir. You now have before you this evening's agenda. I would like to delete item number 2B, the Kraft Foods resolution. Mayor Christensen will deliver that in person. That being said, are there any other additions or deletions to the agenda? If none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Will be second.
Moved by Mr. Dixon, second by Mr. Hare. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us the consent agenda. Those are the items on the council agenda that are considered routine and non-controversial or marked with an asterisk and will be acted upon by a single roll call vote of council. There'll be no separate discussion of the items unless a member of council so requests, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent agenda and considered as a separate item. What's the pleasure of council?
Move for acceptance.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Hare, seconded by Mr. Slavin. Any questions on the motion? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Persa?
Yes.
Mr. Slavin?
Yes.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Bowman?
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Item number 2 this evening is a presentation on the LEED Gold certification from the Dover Library by Marge Sear, the Director of the Dover Public Library, Scott Koenig, our City Manager, Mayor Christensen, Greg Moore, Becker Morgan, and Doug Moss of Holtzman Moss Patino to join me at the podium.
When the steering committee began to put together the plans for the library in 2008, it became enormously clear from the feedback that we received from the public that the public wanted us to build a library that was cost-effective and responsible to the environment. And to that end, we committed to a process of becoming LEED certified. And LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And I am here tonight to tell you that the library has achieved a rating of LEED Gold certification. So I'd like to bring Doug Moss to the podium. Doug was our chief architect from Holtzman Moss Botino.
City Council members, thank you for this time. We want to congratulate all of you on this very high honor because this is a substantial accomplishment for the City of Dover. It's also a substantial accomplishment for the citizens of Dover because, as Margie said, the citizens that were coming on a regular basis to the committee members, to the committee workshops, they were the ones that expressed their strong interest and their strong desire to have a building that was sustainable. And to them, what was important was that it was a healthy building, one that they felt comfortable inside the building, also one that was going to save the city money on a year in and year out basis because this is a building that will last for 50, 75, or 100 years. And one of the reasons that we were able to attain the level of LEED Gold certification is because we have been able to save over 35% from a normal building that was this same size if you were to build it by code. But because of the things that were done, there was a 35% savings in that. We have a 43% savings in potable water usage in the building, and over 90% savings of the water irrigation that we're using around the building. We diverted over 316 tons in the landfills because of the way we recycled materials throughout the construction process. And we are bringing in natural ventilation with over 30% outside air, which is very atypical from a building that's just built to a normal code perspective. So all of these things, plus literally hundreds of other examples that we could give you, are all of the things that add up to providing the citizens of Dover an extraordinary building, and one that it will last into the duration, into the 50, 100 years from today. So I congratulate all of you on this very substantial accomplishment for the city of Dover.
Yeah, I guess I'm most proud of the building because as president of Downtown Dover Partnership, it is the single biggest project that helps our downtown. It brings community people to the building. There's plenty of meeting space. Our entire community comes to the downtown to use the library, and we're very proud of that. And it has been a great tool for our Downtown Dover Partnership to keep energized downtown Dover. And for that, I want to thank all of City Council. Also want to say that one of the big advantages that we put in the building that Doug designed was a geothermal well system. And that geothermal well system is literally located under the parking lot in the back. It's the only one I've ever seen that's actually in a parking lot, so the use of the space is great. We got great parking there, great access, and it's just a wonderful community meeting space, and we're so proud. Thank you.
So I have Mayor, a certificate. Thank you. Mr. Bono, certificate. Thank you. And here's a thank you to you and all of the other council members for their support in the years that it has taken to build this building. So we thank you all very much.
Thank you. Arch, before you leave, I figure I'd best make some remarks from the podium up here. This afternoon we had a brief ceremony at the library, and we talked about what this represents to the city of Dover, obviously what you've related to us this evening. But it also means a lot more to the city. This is the single largest project that we've done in the city of Dover, aside from Calpine and the Garrison Technical Center. That's going on right now. And I will relate to the public who may be watching us this evening. I have neighbors who live up on State Street who told me as recently as last night that the library is one of the reasons they moved to Dover. They came here from Manhattan, and they find this library to be more accessible and friendlier than any of the libraries they have in the city of Manhattan. More modern, up to date, easier to use, and obviously, we don't have the population base that they have in Manhattan, but we have had, what, in the neighborhood of 5,000 people or more that have come through the library since it's been open, and it's used daily on a regular basis. And Marge, you and the staff deserve a lot of credit for that. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Item number 3 on the agenda this evening is the final reading of proposed ordinance 2014-18 with staff amendment number 1 and staff amendment number 1. The first reading was accomplished during the council meeting of August 25th, 2014. The public hearing and final reading were deferred during the council meeting of October 13th to allow staff to bring an amendment forward. Copies of the proposed ordinance are available at the entrance to city council chambers. Since this is an amendment to the zoning code, a public hearing is required. First, I'll entertain a motion to consider the final reading by title only, which is simply to allow the waiving of the reading. A separate motion will be necessary for its adoption. What's the pleasure of council?
So moved.
Mr. Slavin?
Second.
Mr. Dixon, second. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Ordinance 2014-18 with staff amendment number 1, amending Appendix B, zoning, Article 3, District Regulations, Section 24, Planned Neighborhood Design Option, PND subsection 24.62, buffers, and Article 4, zoning, bulk and parking regulations, Sections 4.10 and 4.11. Mrs. Townsend.
Thank you. You'll recall that this was originally scheduled for the last meeting on October 13th, and at that meeting, I requested that the final reading and public hearing be deferred, as I realized that the staff amendment number 1 was omitted from the packet. The Planning Commission reviewed the proposed amendment along with the staff amendment 1. The zoning text amendment does two things. It removes the 40-foot buffer around the perimeter of developments approved through the planned neighborhood design option. And the second thing it does is it changes the setbacks to allow some more flexibility in lot layout. The staff amendment number 1 simply acknowledges that this is intended to be retroactive so that that 40-foot buffer that impacts a number of residential lots in the city and prohibits any structures from being within that 40 feet would be removed from those lots. So if approved with the amendment, we would contact the property owners affected by the 40-foot buffer on a private or on an individual lot rather than in common open space, and make them aware that this has changed and that things that were previously denied because of non-compatibility with the zoning would be able to be approved.
Any questions of staff? See none, this does require a public hearing. I declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? If so, come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of council and staff. John Pardee of the law firm Prickett, Jones & Elliott, 11 North State Street, Dover, and I rise to speak in favor of this ordinance. I appreciate the time and energy that the staff has put into this. I believe that it will enhance greatly the flexibility for design for projects of this nature, which is, after all, the intent of the PND ordinance. Some of the concerns that have been raised, I think, are alleviated by the fact that, for example, the 40-foot buffer currently in these types of developments has become a virtual no man's land. It's an area of the property where the property owners can't make any improvements, and they therefore have very little incentive to maintain it. And this ordinance would, I think, solve that problem. You also have, don't forget, a great deal of flexibility at the Planning Commission level with PND projects to impose particular requirements where circumstances warrant. The idea here really is to give flexibility in design. The way the ordinance is written currently, the setbacks are simply too restrictive, and the market, the product that the market demands is incapable of fitting within the footprint. So for all of those reasons, I would encourage council to support the ordinance, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pardee. Any questions? Mr. Lynn.
Mr. Pardee, just for illustrative purposes, can you just give us an example of an existing neighborhood where this would have made a difference in terms of the buffer or the lot layouts?
Sure. I'm trying to remember the name of the project. I know the project by my client's name. It's Meadows.
Clearview Meadows.
Clearview Meadows. Thank you, Ms. Townsend. In Clearview Meadows, you may recall it's a project that actually went into bankruptcy. It's the project behind Safeway and Target. And in part, the project went into bankruptcy because the developer was unable to market it as it was currently designed and approved. The project was purchased by my client out of bankruptcy, and immediately they ran into the same problem. There was no demand for the type of product that the building envelope permitted. And all of the builders that my client was meeting with about the project had no interest unless they could build a little more attractive product. The basic problem is that the footprint is too narrow and too shallow. The narrowness is not so much of an issue if you can get the depth. Most people who are looking for units in PNDs typically would like to have 1 or 2 floors. They'd like to have bedrooms on the first floor if at all possible. And unfortunately, the footprint is just so constrictive that it doesn't allow for much flexibility there. So this will allow for the type of flexibility in design that the market is seeking, and I think will encourage a project which thus far has been stale and kind of an eyesore to flourish. The developer who acquired that particular project is very eager, obviously, to improve it and make it sell rather than have it sit and continue to rot. And I think this ordinance will help encourage that. That's the best example that I can think of. And the other point I wanted to mention real quickly, don't forget that the code also has a requirement for a buffer between residential and commercial. So where a buffer would be appropriate, for example, between residential and commercial, you'll still have that. This buffer that was created in the PND ordinance was really kind of I think at the time the ordinance was drafted, the thought was that it would be a good idea to have a buffer all around these PND projects, but it's proven to be totally unnecessary and actually creates more problems than it solves.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Party.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak in favor of this amendment, of this zoning ordinance? Seeing none, is there anyone who would care to speak against the proposed ordinance? Anyone who would care to speak against the proposed ordinance? If so, come forward, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. What's the pleasure of council with regard to staff amendment number 1?
Move for acceptance, staff recommendation. Second.
Moved by Mr. Hare, seconded by Mr. Dixon for the approval of staff amendment number 1. Any questions on the motion, Mr. Lynn?
Just for Ms. Townsend, just a brief question. I assume that there's a retroactivity component to this, such that existing neighborhoods are no longer under the onus of having the 40-foot buffer?
Yes, that's the purpose of the staff amendment.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn, for the clarification. Any other questions? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Persa?
Yes.
Mr. Slavin?
Yes.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Bowman?
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Now, what's the pleasure of council with regard to proposed ordinance 2014-18 as amended by staff amendment number 1?
Move for acceptance. As amended.
That's correct. Moved
Second.
by Mr. Hare, seconded by Mr. Anderson. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Persa?
Yes.
Mr. Slavin?
Yes.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Bowman?
Yes, motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Item number 4 is a public hearing in violation of dangerous building ordinance on property located at 1370 College Road, owned by Sarah E. Jones. Mrs. Townsend.
Thank you. All right. Okay, again, this is property located at 1370 College Road. We've had 11 code enforcement cases on this property since 2008. Exterior code violations such as trash and debris, grass, junked cars, failure to obtain building permits. Utilities were terminated in July 2013. It was registered as vacant by the city staff in November 2012. It was condemned on August 18, 2014, due to the code violations and no active utility accounts. There are $200 in code enforcement citations against the property and $7,163.85 in delinquent taxes on properties owned by this owner. On this particular property, there's $526.80 of delinquent real estate taxes. These are just some pictures. You can see some of the junk in the yard. Some overgrowth. It's boarded. This is one I think that we found to be not secured, and we've had to board. Again, junk in the yard. This is the interior of the dwelling. Areas that have been entirely gutted. Holes in the floor. Damage to the ceiling. So we are bringing it forward as unfit for habitation, general welfare, code violations, and unoccupied buildings. So again, I think if you do have any questions, I'd be glad to accept them.
Any questions of
Oops,
staff?
I forgot the recommendation. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm not going to read this entirely. It's in your action form and it's in front of you, but our recommendation is to declare the building and accessory structures dangerous, to order the repair or demolition by November 27th, and if not done by that period of time, staff would proceed and then recover costs as described.
Any questions of Mrs. Townsend? Mr. Lynn?
Have we had any contact with the owner at all? Has she reached out to you?
I did find out from our code enforcement staff that a member of the owner's family called last week and wanted some additional time. Typically, once we've sent the notice and put it on the agenda, if additional time is going to be granted, it's granted by council.
Understood. Do we know if someone's here tonight? Do you-
I am not entirely sure. Yes. Okay, yes, there's someone here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Townsend. There'll be an opportunity for comment during the public hearing. This does require a public hearing. I would like to first ask if I declare the public hearing open. I would first like to ask if there is anyone who would like to speak in favor of declaring this property dangerous. Anyone who would like to speak in favor of the staff report? Seeing none, I would like to ask if there was anyone who would like to speak against declaring this property dangerous. If so, come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Yes, hello. Good evening, Council. My name is Dwayne Jones. My address is 1290 West State College Road, and I'm here to speak against declaring the property due to the circumstances of just needing more time due to the circumstances. My mother, she got sick a year ago, where she had a brain aneurysm. So we got back on on finances, but as of now, I just came in touch with my aunt and a couple other family members that are going to help me out. So if I can just have more time, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions of Mr. Jones, Mr. Anderson, and Mr. Lynn?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Jones, you say more time. We need something more concrete. How much time would you need?
I need like a 6-month period, sir.
Thank you. And then what would you be able to accomplish in those 6 months?
Basically, should be able to, well, as you've seen some of the pictures, one half of the house was already gutted, where we had started before my mother got sick, and then, during the process of not even maintaining the property at a time where some vandals came and took the windows out, and and really were like living in the property. So that's why all those things were in the house. But basically, just in that time, I would be able to have everything finished at least on the inside. On the inside, basically, by starting, by the doors, and basically have to have some electric to get started. So basically, it's just a time process. That's all, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Mr. Lynn?
Mr. Anderson asked the same question that I was going to ask.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions of Mr. Jones? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak against declaring this property dangerous? Anyone else would like to speak against? I declare the public hearing closed. What's the pleasure of council? Mr. Lynn?
I just have a question for Ms. Townsend. Can you describe for us essentially where this property is in terms of, are there other houses around it? Does it pose a danger to any surrounding structures?
There are other houses around it. They're not necessarily particularly close.
Okay. So if this house were for example, to catch fire or something, the other houses are fairly distant?
Yes, I mean, it's a pretty close area, but there's more space than in a lot of neighborhoods. More space than in the downtown.
The relative of the owner had mentioned that individuals had gotten in. It's secured now, is that correct?
Yes.
And a question for Chief Burnett. Are we having any criminal activity at this property at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Perza.
Has the owner or owner representatives, contractors, anything like that approached the city to review any kind of detailed remediation or improvement plan?
No.
So this is the first contact we've had with anybody on the owner. Is it at this meeting?
Well, last week they did contact the code enforcement staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions of Mrs. Townsend? Again, what's the pleasure of council? Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. Mr. President, I move that the staff recommendation be accepted with a proviso that the date be changed to March 27th with a review in 2 months, which would be December 27th, to ensure that progress is being made.
Second.
That's in the form of an amendment for the staff recommendations, been moved by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Lynn. Any questions on the motion?
One comment.
Mr. Hare?
I think some of the easy fixes I'd like to see accomplished, like cleaning up the outside, getting the trash out of there. I mean, that's something that can be done, you know, like I said, we'll see the updated progress report, what happens, and get that.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Can you meet that requirement?
Yes, sir. Yes, Council.
Any other first, Mrs. Townsend?
The motion indicates coming back on December 27th. We don't have that second meeting in December,
meeting.
so would you want to push it to the first meeting in January?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Mr. Perza?
Just a question for Ms. Townsend is if the application's approved as is, but the family actually starts rebuilding and repairs, would the city really take the building down? Or would they let the family finish the process?
When work is started and actively moving forward, we do not demolish.
So basically, if they start within 30 days, the city would be happy?
If they
What I'm
start
trying
and
to
continue moving.
Yeah, well, I don't want to be back every 2, 3, 4, 5 months reviewing these things, so, okay.
Mr. Lynn?
Are they going to have any problem getting a building permit?
We changed the clean hands ordinance.
I recall.
So for a dangerous building, they can get a building permit.
Even with the taxes being owed?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what they wouldn't be able to do is get a rental permit to put somebody in if they wanted to rent the property.
Understood.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Mrs. Townsend? You have a motion before you with amendments. Any further questions on the motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Perza?
No?
Mr. Slavin?
Yes.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes, motion carries 6-1. Item number 5C, review of the draft of Downtown Development District application and proposed resolution number 2014-13 in support of application for designation as the Downtown Development District. Mrs. Townsend.
Thank you. The The updated application is in your packet. It starts on page 103. It's attachment 4 to the Parks, Recreation, and Community Enhancement Committee minutes. The draft application was reviewed by the committee at their meeting on October 13th. At that time, I did tell them that we were still working to gather our letters of support and fine-tune some of the aspects of the application. So in the intervening time, we have done that. The Downtown Development District program, as I'm sure you know at this point, is an initiative passed by the state of Delaware. They will be designating 3 downtown development districts in the first year of the program. There's $7 million allocated in the governor's budget, well, actually in the approved budget for the current fiscal year at the state level, that would go toward incentives within the downtown development districts. So we will be competing with other municipalities in Kent County because the state will be doing 1 per county. So the 3 segments of the application, 50% of the application is based on the demonstrated need and impact. So we looked at the demographic information, the crime data, and the vacant buildings, dangerous buildings, vacant lots, that type of information, and the impact that we could have. And I think with the track record that we have with the Downtown Dover Partnership and the city being very active and working on projects, and the track record we have now with NCAL leading the Restoring Central Dover plan funded through the Wells Fargo Foundation, I think we demonstrate both the need and the impact. So that's 50% of the application. 30% of the application is the district plan. What we have done for the district plan is we have brought together 2 planning documents that I believe comprise a very solid district plan. The first is the Dover Transit Center Neighborhood Plan and Design Book, which was completed in 2011, and was actually the basis for the North Street improvements that we just completed over the last year. The other planning document that becomes part of our district plan is the Restoring Central Dover, our Vision for Vitality, which is the plan that is the outcome of the Wells Fargo Foundation grant to NCAL. The city also participated in helping to fund that grant. That document is in its final draft form. I would love to bring it to you tonight complete, but unfortunately the consultant had some challenges at the end of the process in getting everything in place. But what I can assure you is that the Restoring Central Dover Steering Committee is very active. NCAL has been a great leader in this effort, and there is a lot of momentum coming out of this process into the implementation phase. And NCAL submitted last week on behalf of the steering committee to the Wells Fargo Foundation for a $750,000 implementation grant. So if we are successful in getting the district designation, that Wells Fargo Foundation grant will, again, even further leverage the funding that would come into the city due to the designation. The third aspect of the application that will be evaluated is the package of incentives that we offer, and that's 20% of the application. What we have submitted is the application includes the incentives that we currently offer, the building permit fee waivers, impact fee waivers, and tax abatement on the value of improvement for a period of 10 years. We also have a number of residential incentives that include the tax waiver for owner-occupied residential uses within a defined area that under the Downtown Development District program, we would look to expand to the entire district boundary. We have the first-time home buyer real estate transfer tax exemption, and again, within the downtown area that's defined, that would be expanded to be the entire Downtown Development District. We offer to the seller also, if they're selling it to an owner who will be occupying that home, they are eligible for that transfer tax abatement as well. We have brought forward, and I know I've discussed it at council meeting before, the idea that, one, we would do an ordinance to waive business license fees for new businesses for a period of 3 years, that we would bring forward an ordinance that would allow for a rebate of 50% of the real estate transfer tax for properties that are sold and then developed. That rebate would be available at certificate of occupancy, so you don't get that unless you actually follow through on developing the land. So those are the added incentives that we have put into the application. In addition, the Downtown Dover Partnership has approved funding and will continue to fund in their budget some architectural services. They will be doing an RFP to get an architect so that when businesses come into an existing tenant space and they deal with some of the code issues that catch them up and make it a little more difficult to open than they had planned, we can catch them at the front end with that architectural help and help to pay for that. So at this point, the application, I think, has come together very nicely. I'm going to publicly thank Bill Cook and Jeremy Gibb, who put in a lot of time and effort into the mapping and the data gathering and the demographics. You know, we wouldn't be at this stage without them. It really was a team effort. And the application is due this week, so I'm very hopeful that it gets the endorsement of council this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Townsend. Any questions of staff? Mr. Persin.
Is Dover guaranteed a return on this investment or this project? In the sense that you mentioned something that we were being paired off against other municipalities for the tax funding. Does that mean that if we go through this process, we may not get the funding for this?
If we submit this application, it is possible that another town could get the designation and that we would reapply next year.
So it's an annual funding that the state has?
Yes, and we wouldn't get the money directly. The way it would work is that a developer, builder, property owner would be able to apply to the state for a rebate of 20%, of up to 20% of their development costs. So the money goes directly to the private property owner
But
or
only if
applicant.
Dover is awarded the designation?
Yes, we do. Nobody in Dover gets this money unless we get the designation.
What happens if we make a whole series of code changes intending for this to occur and we don't get it? Do we then have to go back and change the code then to fix it?
Well, here's kind of the way I was planning to proceed with this. And I'm a little bit optimistic that we'll get it because I think we do have a very good application.
I have no doubt the city's done a good application.
So, but Smyrna could have a good application too. But I'm very optimistic. But what I would plan to do is work on getting the ordinances ready to present to committee in late January. By the time they would go to council, we would know if we get the designation. Now, that said, these things, even without the designation, could help to spur business growth and redevelopment. So I think that's another conversation that we have if we don't get the designation.
So it's either we just do them for that reason, or I guess I have a philosophical kind of issue with the state's taking state taxpayer money and we're being played off against each other. I think if you're trying to improve the economic development aspect of it, help us.
I know that the hope of the program is that by designating 3 in the first year, they can make a big impact. And
But one in Kent County.
Right, 1 in Kent County.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Perzan. Any other questions? Mr. Lynn?
Not a question, but when we're ready for a motion.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Committee has recommended endorsement of the draft Downtown Development District application, acknowledging that staff will continue to refine the application prior to its final presentation to council and adoption of resolution 2014-13 as submitted. Mr. Lynn, on the motion.
Absolutely. I recommend that we endorse the draft Downtown Development District application, acknowledging that staff will continue to refine the application prior to final presentation. And thanks, Anne Marie, for doing this. I appreciate it. This is good for Dover. Thank you.
Second motion. Thank you. A motion by Mr. Lynn, second by Mr. Slavin. Any questions on the motion?
There is the question, Mr. President. Did Councilman Lynn, did that also include the resolution?
Yes, and adoption of resolution number 2014-13 as submitted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for the clarification. Any other questions on the motion? Mr. Anderson.
Just a comment, Mr. President. I think that the staff has done a tremendous job. I can hardly see how we can't get the application, but who knows what everybody else does. But if it's for effort, the effort has been tremendous, and I think no matter what happens, what's been done shouldn't be left on the table, because I think what has been included in here in the details, the plans are good for the city regardless what the state does. Because I'm not a big one for following the state, but I am big in the city of Dover doing things which make sense for the residents of Dover and for its business community.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any other comments? I will just follow by saying that you all know my feelings about getting money from the state. I've been an advocate for getting as much money for the city of Dover as we can. We've seen an awful lot of state money go to Riverfront Development Corporation in Wilmington and other entities in the state down at the beach area. Anything that we can do in the city of Dover to get some of that tax money from the state. I hope that our state leaders are listening very closely to us, and we're very supportive of what the governor has done getting this legislation passed. Any other questions on the motion? If not, I will ask for a roll call. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Persa?
For the reasons expressed by Mr. Anderson and Mr. Boner, I'll vote yes.
Mr. Slavin?
Yes.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Boner?
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Now I need a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lynn, second by Mr. Dixon to accept the report. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Item number 9, the tentative labor contract with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Mr. Koenig.
Thank you, Mr. Boner. I'm going to defer to Mr. Mandalis, our attorney.
Good evening, Mr. President, Mayor, and members of City Council. My name is Glenn Mandalis, for the record, and I'm an attorney with Baird Mandalis Brockstead. For over a year now, working with your management staff, I have been negotiating the first labor agreement between the city and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME represents approximately 40 city employees. On July 30th, the union ratified an initial version of that agreement, and the agreement was then brought to this council a month later, and in September, City Council rejected that version of the agreement. Based upon that rejection and a lot of the comments that were made during that meeting, the city manager and I sort of regrouped and thought about how we could address some of the things that were raised, and we ended up having a meeting jointly requested by the union and the city with the executive director of the Public Employment Relations Board, Debbie Murray Shepard, to see if she would have some thoughts and ideas of how we could move forward and finalize this agreement. So what we're bringing you this evening are revisions to the contract that are a result of that meeting with Ms. Murray Shepard and the comments that were made during your city council meeting. The union has not ratified these amendments to that version that they saw earlier. So if you were to move forward and approve this agreement this evening, it would still need to go before the union. Rather than spend the time going through each and every element of the contract that has already been presented to you twice in open forum, I wanted to focus on the two issues that were really kind of percolated to the top as I watched the video and heard your comments. First of those is there was a window for individuals in this employee group to retire of 2 years. They could retire within 2 years if they were eligible and still be able to take advantage of retiree health care, the same as it was before the city implemented the 15% cost sharing in healthcare premiums. That length of time seemed to create some tension among members of City Council, and we've talked through that, and we've now narrowed that window to a 30-day period to occur at the end of this fiscal year. So it'd be during the 30 days at the end of, from June 1 to June 30th, basically of this year, there'd be a window for those individuals to retire. There are 5 individuals that would be able to take advantage of that opportunity. So it's narrowed now down from 2 years down to a 30-day period that's to occur during the last month of this fiscal year. The second issue that seemed to be one that created a lot of concern is some individual increases to 3 job classifications. Increases, I mean additions to base salary to these 3 job classifications. There is one set to be implemented July 1st of 2014, and then a second one to be implemented July 1st of 2015. Through our discussions with Ms. Murray Shepherd and the union, what we are proposing tonight is that the increases that would have occurred July of 2015 be deleted. So there'd only be increases during the end of this fiscal year, or there'd only be one increase implemented effective July 1st, 2014, rather than the 2. So those are the changes. We've also agreed, though, to take those 3 job classifications and run them through the city's standard review process to determine if they are those salaries are appropriate, if there should be any adjustments to them. Those are the 2 main amendments, the only changes to the contract that you saw earlier in September. We're hopeful that you will ratify it tonight. I still think this is a good contract for the city. It's been, a first contract always has a lot of issues, and I think we've achieved some things here. The union has achieved some things, but in the end, I think this is a contract we should all get behind and approve this evening. Are there any questions? I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Mandelis. Any members of the council have questions? Mr. Hare.
Pertaining to the window to retire, it seems like it would make more sense, and I would make this motion, if it was from the current time through the end of the fiscal year. So if they want to retire, and somebody wanted to retire in March, they didn't have to wait till June. So it would be that whole time that would be.
So Councilman Hare's proposal then would be to have the window to retire from the time that it's ratified and approved to the last day of the current fiscal year, to June 30th of this year. And that would seem to me something that the union would be supportive of. It provides more opportunity than less opportunity. The window opens from 30 days to more. And Ms. Valentine, I think, is here, and she's shaking her head that she'd have no problem with that.
Okay. Then
What you would need this evening, because there's not just a motion to approve these couple changes, is a motion to approve the entire contract as amended by the couple items that I've talked through this evening and Mr. Hare's proposal.
That's correct.
I'll make a motion to accept the contract as presented and with the amendment for the window.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Any questions on the motion? Mr. Anderson.
There is, Mr. President, I still have my concern about the retroactivity of the April raise, but in spite of that particular misgiving, I think we've probably negotiated as good of a contract as we're going to get, and I will reluctantly vote yes tonight.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments by members of council or questions? Mr. Slavin.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I will also be voting yes on this contract. And, sometimes we're criticized for being penny wise and pound foolish, of looking for, kind of easy savings that occur early on while leaving a bill for later generations. And I think, thanks to Mr. Koenig and Mr. Mandalis, we've negotiated a contract which balances that out for us. The additional cost and salary, I believe, based on some kind of quick numbers that we've done, are offset by gains we'll make for long-term expenses when it comes to health care. And I think the employees have negotiated in good faith, and I think we got as far as we're going to get on this, and it's time to vote it up or down.
Thank you, Mr. Slavin. Any other comments or questions by members of council? Mr. Persa.
I guess we had,
Pull your microphone closer, please.
we had this conversation at the last time we voted on this, and I guess since then the city has met with the PERB crew, or the PERB council, or the board, or whatever it is that kind of governs this.
That's correct, sir.
I mean, just because the PERB crew, or PERB says okay, I don't think that should be an endorsement that this is a good deal. Because PERB governs this for the labor community. I mean, they're going to approve anything, I think, that benefits the boards in general.
I think Mr. Mandelis has made it very clear that they had discussions with her, but it was their verbal indication that they would be more apt to side in agreement with this labor negotiation. And I think, and I will speak for myself. I know labor negotiations are always very difficult. I know that there are some people who are happy with this result. I know that there are some people who are unhappy with this result, but that's part of negotiations. Karen, I think you have represented your union very well and fairly before the city, and we appreciate that. The next round of negotiations are going to be just as difficult. We have to keep in mind that we have 4 labor unions that we have to deal with, and this is the one that's at hand, and we need to get this resolved. And I think that this is as good a deal as we're going to get for the citizens of Dover. I think it's in the best interest of the long run of the citizens. Any other questions or comments by council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Unfortunately, I must disqualify.
Mr. Persa?
No.
Mr. Slavin?
Yes.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Bovee?
Yes, motion carries 5-1.
Thank you, members of City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mandelis. Thank you very much. And we must make a note of one abstention, Sean.
Disqualification.
Item number 12 on the agenda tonight is the first reading of proposed ordinance 2014-23, rezoning request for property located at 603 West Division Street. It is recommended for referral to the Planning Commission on November 17, 2014, and that the public hearing be set for December 8, 2014. Before we continue, gentlemen from the Boy Scout troop, thank you very much for being here this evening. It's a school night, and thank you very much for keeping them up so late. We'll continue with the first reading of proposed ordinance 2014-23. The public hearing be set for December 8, 2014 at 7:30, at which time the final reading and council action will take place. Copies are available at the entrance of the council chambers. It can be obtained from the city clerk's office. First reading of the rezoning ordinance is for introduction and referral to the amendment only, and should not be relied upon as approval of the rezoning of the zoning classification. This is for property at 603 West Division Street, consisting of 2 parcels, 16,538 square feet plus or minus, and 14,465 square feet plus or minus, owned by West Division Holdings LLC. The property is currently zoned M, manufacturing, subject to COZ 1 corridor overlay zone, and the proposed zoning is C3, service commercial, subject to the corridor overload zone 1 corridor overload zone. Mrs. Townsend, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, this is a rezoning request for approximately 31,000 square feet of property just west of the railroad tracks on Division Street, on the north side of Division Street. And the requested zoning is C3. The current zoning is manufacturing. Both would be subject to the corridor overlay zone that is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So at this point, we're just looking to set the dates.
Thank you, Mrs. Townsend. Any questions of staff? Pleasure of council.
Move to accept the recommendation.
Second. Moved by Mr. Hare, seconded by Mr. Dixon. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I now defer to the city clerk for the introduction of the proposed ordinance in accordance with section 1-9 of the Dover Code. Madam Clerk.
Proposed ordinance number 2014-23, amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map of the city of Dover by changing the zoning designation of 2 parcels of property located at 603 West Division Street. This constitutes the first reading.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item 13 this evening, final reading of proposed ordinance 2014-22. First reading of the proposed ordinance was accomplished during the council meeting of October 13, 2014. Copies are available at the entrance of council chamber. First, I will entertain a motion to consider the final reading by title only, which is simply to allow the waiving of the reading. A separate motion will be necessary for its adoption. What's the pleasure of council?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Slavin, second by Mr. Hare. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Proposed ordinance 2014-22, the budget amendment related to capital investment plans for fiscal year 2014. Carry forward balances. Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes, in your packet is the final reading of the ordinance that was presented during the last meeting with the budget amendments that were needed to finish the projects that were started last year with their budget balances and bring those forward to this year. There was a question asked during the last meeting about the $104,000 for the Parkland Reserve and by Mr. Anderson, and that was included in the ordinance for the completion of the HVA system at the Pitt Center. Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Any questions of staff? Pleasure of council.
Move for acceptance.
Moved by Mr. Hare.
Second.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Any questions on the motion? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Persa?
Yes.
Mr. Slavin?
Yes.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Bowman?
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Item number 12, or number 14 this evening is council members' announcements. Any council members' announcements? I will conclude this evening's meeting by reminding everyone that next Tuesday is Election Day. It's your right to go and vote, no matter what your party, no matter what your affiliation. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. And I would encourage everyone to exercise your right to vote in that election. It's a very important election for all of us. That being said, if there are no other members' announcements, we will adjourn.